It's Mia with Minerva, and today we are sewing a super cute, really easy top. It's NewLook's 6292. Are you ready? Let's go. Okay, so for this pattern, if you look at the back of the pattern, you're going to see towards the bottom, finished garment measurements. That's what you want. Your garment measurements at the bottom, that gives you the finished measurement for your bust. That's what you want to pay attention to. That's going to tell you what size you need to cut out. So look at the back of your pattern, find your bust measurement. Remember, we're doing view D. Okay, so the sew along is for view D. Okay, find your size. Cut out your pattern, and we'll be ready to sew. But in the meantime, let's take a look at the tools and notions that we're going to need to construct this pattern. So we're going to be using a Minerva exclusive fabric. It is a Challis, and it's called Kingdom Coiled, or Coiled Kingdom. Really pretty, really lightweight fabric that will look really, really good on anybody. If you are into reptiles and just really cool prints, this would definitely be the one for you. We also need, of course, some thread. So we have our thread here. We'll use this black thread. And then we also need interfacing. Okay, so we've got some interfacing right here. We'll use this interfacing to stabilize our fabric, and we can go ahead and get started. Let's just take our pattern, cut it out, and go ahead and transfer all of our markings. Here's all of our pattern pieces cut out. Our front facing here has our interfacing on the back, attached to the back, and we can go ahead and start construction. The first thing we want to do is stay stitch the neckline of our front pattern piece. So I'll show you how to do that. Remember, we're doing view D on this pattern. And you will notice on step 1, it tells us to stay stitch the neckline 1/4 of an inch from the edge. So we're just going to start from this edge. It gives you arrows on the pattern to go from the shoulder to the center, shoulder to center. So just stay stitch a 1/4 of an inch from the edge of the raw edge of the neckline to stay stitch the fabric. This is to keep the fabric from stretching out of place. So you're going to stitch from here to the center, flip your fabric over, and stitch from this side to the center. Okay, I've got my markings there, some tailor's tacks where we had our markings, but you're just going to go ahead and stitch that straight to the center. The next thing you want to do is to stitch your darts. When you're stitching your darts, you are pulling your fabric together where we made our marking, and you're going to press that dart down after you have stitched it. So you can see here on the back side, I've got these darts stitched, and now we're going to take it to the iron and press the darts down. It's always a good idea to use a pressing cloth when you're working with very delicate fabrics, just to protect the fabric a bit. All right, so we've got our darts pressed down, everything nice and flat. And now if you're going to add pockets, which I'm not going to add pockets, but if you wanted to add pockets to your top, this is where you would do so. In step 2, it gives you the directions for adding pockets. I'm not going to add pockets on mine. So we're going to move right on to step 5, which is stay stitching the back neckline. So we've got to stay stitch our back piece just like we did the front piece. Again, if you look at step 5, it gives us the directions that the stitches need to go in. So we're going to stay stitch from this corner to the center, and from this corner to the center. We're going from that top shoulder to the center, and then we'll flip over and do the other side. 1/4 of an inch from the edge. Now we are going to place the right sides together at the shoulder seam and stitch the shoulder seams together. We'll use our 5/8 of an inch seam allowance, stitching our shoulder seams together, and then we will jump to step number 6 for our front facing, and then jump to step number 10 to attach our front facing. After you've sewn your shoulder seams, you want to make sure that you finish your edges however you choose to do so. I decided to serge mine, but you can do pinking shears and overcast stitch, whatever you prefer, but finish those edges however you see fit. And this was step number 5, doing our shoulder seams. Now we'll move on to step number 6, and we're going to add interfacing to our front facing. So here's our front facing. You'll notice that there's a lot of lines and markings on this front facing. You're going to transfer all those markings however you choose to do so. I've used Tailor Tacks, but you can use a chalk roller, a chalk pencil, friction pen, whatever you choose to use. Just make sure that you're transferring all of the markings, because they become very important when it's time to construct the front of the shirt with this front facing. So the next thing we're going to do is add our interfacing to our fabric. I've already added mine, and then I've made markings. So I've transferred the markings. So my circles are all done in yellow Tailor's tacks, and then my stitching line is done in red thread tracing, and then I've got a chalk mark to show my center. So we are now going to press, after you've transferred those markings, we're now going to press under 3/8 of an inch the sides and lower edge of our facing. We're going to press the sides and this bottom, press it over 3/8 of an inch. So we've got our front facing turned under 3/8 on the sides and the bottom. We are now going to pin this right sides together to the front of our shirt. So you should have some markings for your small dots. Mine are right here. These little yellow Tailor's tacks here. Those are my dots on the front. We are going to line up the dots on our facing. So here's my yellow dots on the facing here. We're going to line these dots up with the dots here and pin. And then we are going to do a basting stitch. Remember, your basting stitch is putting your machine on the longest stitch length. We're going to do a basting stitch right down the middle. We're then going to sew the neck edge starting here using 3/8 of an inch seam allowance. We'll sew here 3/8 of an inch from this edge here, the neck edge. Then we will pivot, stitch all the way down here, pivot again, stitch a little across, and then pivot and come back up and stitch across that neck edge. After you have attached your front facing to the front of your fabric, just pin it in place to keep it from moving. You're going to baste your center line. So just put a basting stitch down the middle. Then we're going to sew 3/8 of an inch from this edge, pivoting right here on our stitching line, and then pivoting back up and finishing off on that edge. Remember, after you base your center line, put your machine back on a regular 2.5 stitch length to pivot to sew your stitching lines. So here's our front facing all attached. We have sewn down the middle, sewn the top edge, and down the sides. What we need to do now is open this center, being very careful not to cut through our stitching line. So we're just going to snip right down the center and stop right before we get to the stitching line at the bottom. Just like this. So when you get to this bottom, get close, but carefully stop right before you get to that stitching line. And so you will have that whole facing cut open like this. After you've gotten your facing cut open, you can put your shirt to the side, and you want to take your pattern piece number 10 and you want to press the neck facing wrong sides together, matching up your small dots. So the yellow tailor's tacks are my small dots. And you want to also match up your notches. So here are my notches here. You want to match up those notches and those dots and just press that entire neck facing strip. After you have gotten the neck facing pressed, we're going to put the neck facing onto the shirt. Now you'll notice on the back of the shirt there are notches on the back of the shirt as well as notches on the neck facing. You're going to line those notches up like this. Put a pin to hold it in place, and then the area of your neck facing that has your marking, your dots, for me, tailor tacks, you're going to line that up with the shoulder seam. So there's one side, here's the other side. There's my dot that represents my dot. Going to line that up with the shoulder seam on the opposite side. Put a pin. Get the raw edges nice and flat, and we'll put a pin right there. And then the edge of our facing, neck facing, will slightly overlap the front edge of the front facing, okay? So I think I'm gonna put another pin right here just to keep this in place. And this little piece here is just gonna slightly overlap that front facing edge. We'll put a pin to hold it in place. Then we're going to sew the neck facing to the garment using 3/8 of an inch seam allowance. So we'll just sew all the way around, attaching the neck facing to the top using 3/8 of an inch seam allowance. So we've now got our neck facing attached to the shirt. We're going to sew this all the way around with using a 3/8 of an inch seam allowance. After you have attached the neck facing to the body of the shirt, we're going to understitch. The pattern tells us to go ahead and layer our seams or grade our seams, which is simply just cutting this seam allowance 2 different lengths so it's not so bulky. If you have a thicker fabric, you can go ahead and do that now. I'm using this Challis and it's so thin that it's not, you know, it doesn't give me much bulk. So I'm going to understitch first and then I will grade my seams down. And so to understitch, you want to make sure that you press your seam allowance towards the neck facing, and then about 1/8 or 1/4 of an inch from the edge of the seam, our seam here, we're going to stitch. And this just helps to keep the facing turned to the inside of the garment as we wear it. We make sure that it won't turn towards the outside. Always back stitching at the beginning and the end. Now that our neck facing has been understitched, before we turn everything to the inside, we're going to go ahead and clip our corners. So right up here, we can just go ahead and clip these corners, making sure not to cut your stitching line. I can pull out all of my tailor's tacks, get all that taken out. And then we're going to give our top a really good press. We're going to turn this section here. You can cut off this seam allowance as well if you like. Okay, and then we're going to turn everything inside out. Turn our entire neck facing to the inside. Turn our front facing to the inside. Turn our neck facing down to the inside, and then we're going to give this a really good press. Make sure that you use your fingers, or very carefully use the edge of a scissor, chopstick, something to get that point turned out, and then we're going to give the entire shirt a really good press. So now we have changed our collar and finished it. Turned it inside out. We've understitched everything and it is looking like perfection. Now here comes the fun part. Minerva always gives us these really cute labels whenever we place an order with them. And so now I'm going to add my fabulous Minerva Maker label to my Me Made top. So I'm going to put my label right here in the middle, and I'm going to attach it so that it doesn't show any stitching on the outside. I'm going to attach it right here on the edge of my collar where my facing was. Oh. And then I'm going to stitch it down. Now that we've got our label attached, we are going to sew the front to the back at the side seams. So you want to make sure that your side seams are all lined up. Your notches are lined up as well. And we're going to stop sewing at our marking, at our small dot. So we're going to sew from the shoulder all the way down to our dot, our marking, and we'll back stitch right there. We're going to do this on both sides. Now that our sides are sewn, we've stopped at our dot here and we've got a little split at the bottom. We're going to start our hemming process. So all you want to do is turn the bottom edges front and back, turn them under 1/4 inch, and then you're going to turn them over another 5/8 or 1/2 inch or 1 inch, depending on how you like your hems to be. Depending on if you're too, taller or shorter, you might want to adjust how high your hem allowance is, and it's a matter of personal preference. But all you're going to do is just turn that first edge under 1/4, then turn it under again, whatever your desired end result hem allowance is going to be, and then you're just going to stitch right here. Just stitch right along that edge, okay? And then we will work on folding in our sides for our split, and then sewing that, hemming that. We've got most of our shirt done. Our tag is attached and our side seams have been sewn. But for those of you that don't have a serger, one of the ways you could finish your side seam is by using pinking shears. So if you just use pinking shears to cut your seam allowance instead of serging, that will give you a nice finished look like here. You notice when I did the shoulders, I used my serger. But for those of you that don't have a serger, you could very easily use pinking shears and just get a nice, clean, professional looking finish on the inside of your garment as well. So we are going to finish our little split on our top. And what we want to do is simply press our side seams open flat, and then we're going to turn the raw edge of our split in so that we can hide those raw edges. Okay, turn it in maybe 1/4 of an inch and then another 3/8 of an inch and press, and then we're going to stitch close to that seam, pivot right here at the apex up here, and then come back down the other seam so that we have a nice clean finish like this. Okay, I'm going to show you how to do it on the other side. So you want to take your side seam and we're going to simply pin it in place. So you'll notice that I turned it under 1/8 of an inch or so, and then just turned it under again, because what we're trying to do is simply hide that raw edge and get a nice clean finish on the inside. So you're just simply going to turn those edges under, press them, put it right under the machine, and we're going to stitch close to that edge. You're going to back stitch at the very beginning and at the end. And you'll notice that when we get right here to our point, we're going to pivot, stitch across this side, and then turn and go back down that other side. And there we have it. We've got our side seams nice and flat, cut our loose threads, and all we have to do now is attach our sleeve. We're in the home stretch. All that's left to do now is attach our sleeve. And when attaching the sleeve, you want to make sure that you get a nice smooth sleeve like this. Kind of hard to see with this fabric, but you don't want any puckers. You see how this is really nice and flat? That's what you want all the way around. You don't want any puckers on the top of that sleeve head, nothing at all. Just a nice flat sleeve attached to your garment, okay? And at the end of the sleeve, just like we did at the bottom of the top here, you're just gonna turn the sleeve, turn the edge under, however much you want your hem allowance to be for your sleeve. I know some people may like it a little shorter than what the pattern says, maybe a little longer. You're just going to hem it to your liking, okay? Again, just like we did on the bottom hem, 1/4 of an inch, then turn it under again, whatever your desired hem allowance is, and just go ahead and stitch that down, and the sleeve is complete. So I will show you on this side here how to attach the sleeve. So I have found that if you sew on the side that the shirt have the shirt facing up towards you, it helps to give you a nice, really flat, smooth sleeve. Okay, so I like to turn my shirt inside out and take the sleeve portion, have the sleeve portion facing right side out, and then we're just going to go ahead and put the sleeve inside of the shirt and line up that side seam of the sleeve with the side seam of the shirt here. So I'm just going to go ahead and stick this right inside, okay, and then line up the side seam of the sleeve with the side seam of the shirt like this. So there's our sleeve side seam, here's the shirt side seam. Remember to stay stitch your sleeve head. So on your sleeve, you're going to make a row of, not stay stitch, basting stitch. I said stay stitch, basting stitch. You're going to base the top of your sleeve because your sleeve is larger, or the sleeve opening is larger than the sleeve. You'll notice that they won't fit, but we add these basting stitches so that we can pull them and get the sleeve to ease into the arm side here, okay? And so the way you do that is from notch to notch, just a row of basting stitches. So there's one notch, here's the other notch on the other side, and you're going to put a row of basting stitches from notch to notch. Now, the instructions normally will tell you to do 2 rows of basting stitches. I just did 1, but if you do 2 rows, it'll give you a more to work with as far as when you're pulling. And if one of the rows pop, you still have another row to pull and gather that sleeve head in to fit. Okay, so make your row of basting stitches. Your basting stitch again is your highest stitch length. So for most machines, 5.0, some might be 4.0, some might be 6, 7, just depends on your machine. But you're gonna put your stitch length on the highest number that it will go for your machine. You are not gonna back stitch. You start right here at this notch and just stitch maybe 1/4 of an inch away from the edge all the way down to this notch and stop. Make sure you leave long thread tails so that you can pull, okay, those stitches to ease that sleeve in. So our sleeve is in our shirt. We've got the bottom of the sleeve, the seam of the sleeve lined up with the seam of the shirt. What we're now going to do is take the very top of the sleeve, which is indicated by our markings, our tailor's tacks or friction pin, however you marked. You're going to put that marking, which for us is this little tailor tack, right at the very top shoulder seam of the garment. So right there. So that little tailor tack lined up with that marking right there, like this. Put a pin, keep it in place. And then we're going to go on down here. You will notice now that this sleeve is bigger than this opening. It just doesn't fit. You see that? See all this excess fabric here? It just doesn't fit. We're going to go ahead and pull on our basting stitch. So take one of the stitches. We're just going to gently pull and gather the fabric. Okay? And we're going to stop at the pin at the top of the sleeve. As you gather the fabric, the sleeve gets smaller. When that happens, your notches should now line up, because before, when the sleeve was bigger, those notches wouldn't line up. Now our notches will line up. We've got a nice flat edge here from the side seam to the notches. We're going to go ahead and put a pin. Hold that in place. Now, over here, where we just gathered our sleeve, go ahead and just use your fingers to even out those gathers and make sure that your sleeve fits nice and smoothly with the fabric now. Here's the body of the shirt, nice and flat. Here's the sleeve where we've gathered, and it now fits. And so we're just going to go ahead and pin all of this in place so that we can sew it without issue. Okay, and this is just like one of the easiest ways to do a set-in sleeve. So now you see that our sleeve now fits. Okay, we've got our little gathers right here. We're going to do the same thing to the other side. Again, here's the other side of the sleeve. You can clearly see that the sleeve is too big. It does not fit. Okay, we're going to do the same thing. Take one of the stitches, your thread tails, and gently pull and gather that sleeve up towards the head of the sleeve. And as you do that, you will notice now, just like the other side, our notches now line up nice and smooth down here. We're going to go ahead and pop a pin in it. The notches are lined up. And once again, take your fingers and just smooth out, even out those gathers to fit the body of the shirt. Okay, so everything is as nice and smooth as you can get it. And here we have it. Our sleeve now fits our shirt. And we're just going to go ahead and pin all of this in place, take it to the machine, and stitch it down, and we will be done. So we've got just these pins here. And remember, if you need to add more pins, feel free to do that. Add more pins if you need to. Whatever is needed to make sure that you get a nice, smooth installation of this sleeve. You don't want any puckers, any bumps, anything like that. Okay, so the more pins, the better. I know some people don't like to pin. And that's fine, whatever works for you. The goal is just to have a nice, smooth sleeve insertion without any puckers or bubbles or anything like that. Okay, so let's take it to the machine and go ahead and stitch it down. We're going to pull the the free arm off of the machine, place this onto the free arm, and we're just going to go ahead and stitch all the way around. We've got our sleeve attached now to our free arm, and here's a tip. If you attach your sleeve with the body of the top facing you, it helps you to make sure that this part of the fabric, the body of the fabric, whether it's a dress, a top, whatever you're working with, stays nice and flat and you don't get any puckers. Okay, so I always like to sew with the body of the garment facing me on top, and the sleeve is on the bottom. Okay, so we're going to go ahead 5/8 of an inch, and we're going to stitch all the way around. Here's our sleeve all attached. You can now remove all of your tailor's tags markings and finish the raw edge of the sleeve however you choose to. I'm going to serge my edges, but again, you can use pinking shears. You could, you know, trim some of that seam allowance down, do a zigzag stitch, whatever is your preferred method of finishing your seam. You're going to go ahead and finish this sleeve here, finish the raw edge, and hem the bottom of the sleeve, and we're done. There we have it. Shirt all complete, sleeves attached, everything's looking beautiful. A very quick and easy make.